Hey everybody, welcome back to What Happened to You. Today I'm joined by Anna Stoddard, the author of In Plain Sight, which is a book that she wrote about her own What Happened to You experience, which we're going to hear all about today. And I'm really excited to have her on. Anna, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I came across one of your videos. A listener of the podcast, Ashley Saiter Amora, tagged me in your video. And, the way that you were speaking about your experience was just perfect for the podcast. And so thank you to Ashley, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. And thank you, Sebastian. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad to hear that. What happened to you?
So, the year was 2010. No, I'm just kidding. In the summer of 2010, I was 19 years old, and I was working as a door-to-door salesperson. And my manager and I started a friendship that kind of became a little bit of a flirtation, I guess. And he apparently took that as more than what it was intended to be. And he basically held me against my will for 6 weeks and forced himself on me and got me pregnant. And
Wow.
I ended up keeping my son. So that's the short version.
Yeah, the abridged, version. Yeah.
Do you want the details? You want the dirty details?
Totally. Yeah. So when you say that how did that all begin after the flirting started? What led up to him holding you against your will?
Oh, so I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and I was having some problems with my boyfriend, and I went and hung out with my manager a lot. And then one night we were at a pool and drinking, and he kind of pulled me over to him, and I was tipsy, and I was just I kind of just wanted that physical touch or whatever, but nothing more than that. So I didn't exactly pull away. And it wasn't until I saw his boxers on the other side of the hot tub that I realized what was going on. And so I immediately went home, felt super guilty, felt like I was cheating on my boyfriend, which I wasn't. But at the time, that's how it felt. And the next day, I had to go to work. I had to face him. And he acted like nothing had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, hey, we're going to go and work out of town for a couple of days. And I'm like, excuse me? And he said, yeah, we're gonna go and work out of town, about 2 hours away. My mom lives in that city. And so we'll just stay with her while we're out there. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go with you. And he was 38 years old. So
Whoa.
He was twice my age. And
Literally, yeah.
I was a little weirded out, but I told him, I was like, I'm going to go talk to Mr. Bossman, who Mr. Bossman happened to be his cousin.
Is that actually his name, or is that was he like a boss, your manager's boss?
My manager was the cousin of the owner of the company.
Got it.
So the owner of the company, I call Boss Man.
Got it.
And I renamed my manager Rob. That's not his actual name, but when I refer to him, because it'll just make it easier. But
Totally.
So I named him Rob because he kind of robbed me of the rest of my childhood. So
got it.
I've actually never told anybody that, but that's where that name came from.
It's fitting.
Yeah. So I tell Rob I'm going to go talk to Boss Man, and he's like, actually, Boss Man doesn't want you working with us anymore. And I convinced him to let you stay with the company, but he told me that I had to take you out of town and he didn't want to see you. And I'm like,
Interesting.
yeah. So the thing is I had some childhood trauma on top of all of this.
Sure. Don't we all?
Yeah. So because of that, I am a very emotional person and I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and it often gets me in trouble. And so.
And what was that childhood trauma? And no pressure to talk about it if you don't want to.
Oh, it's in the book too.
Nice.
So my older sister was physically abusive and my mother was emotionally abusive. My sister would beat on me and my brother basically my entire childhood. We were latchkey kids. And so my mom worked. It's where children who come home, it actually doesn't happen a lot anymore, but children who come home to no parents at home, they have a key, they're a latchkey kid.
Got it.
You come home, your parents aren't there, you take care of yourself until your parent comes home. And so my mom worked late hours and my sister would often take on the role of the boss. And her idea of being the boss was physically restraining my brother and I and physically beating us.
Boss
and yeah, boss woman. And my mom would never like blame my sister for anything that happened. It was always my fault. Like, how dare you upset your sister like that? How dare you call me at work because of something that's happening at home? But my sister never got in trouble for beating me. And the beatings were so bad that when I was in middle school, the nurses at the school were taking photos of the bruises on my body because I was constantly injured. And so that kind of caused a break in my psyche, I guess.
Sure.
And so I became a fawn, I think is the thing that they call it, where I'm overly trying to keep people happy. Like I do whatever it takes to make them happy and just go with it, because if I don't, there's that fear that I'm going to get my ass kicked.
Right there with you. I'm very much a fawn. I don't know what you call a group of fawns, but we're two of them for sure. Yeah.
We'll get back to that. We're gonna have to figure out what a group of fawn. Is it fawn or fawns?
Maybe well, it's like a pack of deer.
A pack.
So maybe a flock of fawns. I don't know.
I
know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
Love it. So yeah. When Rob told me all of this, it triggered that whole, okay, Mr. Boss Man doesn't like me and I can't get Mr. Boss Man mad at me. So I'm just going to go. And those 3 days were fine. We worked, we did what we had to. Rob's family was really sweet, actually. So we get through those 3 days. I'm like in my car ready to go. And I'm like, all right, let's go back home. And Rob tells me, oh, you can just go straight over to, I think I named him Keith in the book. Keith.
Okay, Keith.
Keith, who is the other cousin of Rob, who also works for the company of Boss Man.
Got it.
And I was like, okay, I can drop you off at Keith's. No big deal. And he goes, no, you're coming with. I'm like, no, I'll drop you off. Like, I'm fine going home. Like, I'm ready to go home to my boyfriend. It's right. It's fine. And he goes, no, you're breaking up with him. And if you don't, then you're going to lose your job, because the only way you're keeping this job is if you're my girlfriend.
Whoa.
And like my head starts spinning, and I needed this job because I was trying to get an apartment with my dad. And my dad told me I needed to keep this job in order for us to be able to afford the apartment. And I had like 4.5 more weeks before we were moving into this apartment. So I had to keep this job. So head is reeling. I'm not really sure like what's going on. And I'm like, no, I want to talk to boss man. And he goes, all right, I'll talk to him. If you're not going to be my girlfriend, you're going to lose your job. He pulls out his phone and I can hear boss man on the other side. And Rob goes, hey, I just wanted to call you and talk to you about Anna. And I hear boss man, yeah, how's it going? And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Like, I'm like freaking out at this point. I have no idea what else to do. And I'm like, okay, fine. And so he like tells boss man, yeah, she's doing great. She got another sale today. And so I'm reeling. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I can't drive. So I have Rob drive. He drives me to my boyfriend's house to collect all my stuff. And I'm just sobbing. And I go in and I'm kind of like hoping that my boyfriend said something, like he was going to stop me. And I basically went in there and I started getting my stuff. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be with you. I got to go. And he just kind of like watched me get my stuff. And I'm like, thanks a lot, Prince Charming. So great.
Oh, that's a wild situation.
Yeah. So I gather all my stuff. I get it in my car and we go over to Keith's hotel room because he lives in a hotel. And then I kind of just like go with the flow. I work, whatever. And then Rob steals my phone and he keeps my car keys. He won't let me go anywhere unless he's nearby. We stop at a gas station and I have to go to the bathroom and he has to stand right outside the bathroom door. He wouldn't let me call anybody, but he made sure my phone was on so that if my dad or my best friend called, he would put my phone on speaker. He'd allow me to talk to them on speaker, but he watched me talk. And then he would send them text messages periodically, whatever. So nobody knew that I was in trouble. And he kept me compliant by keeping me inebriated. I wasn't allowed to have anything to drink unless it had vodka in it.
Whoa. Morning
to night. We stopped working for the and started painting sidewalks. The little number blocks on the sidewalks outside of houses. We were painting those for people and making the money. And he had me working from about 9 o'clock in the morning until the sun went down. Again, he wouldn't let me have anything to drink unless it had alcohol in it. I took medication that like knocked me out at night, and he would make sure to watch me take those pills because he knew that within 30 minutes I would be out. So I couldn't get him to let me have my keys back. I couldn't call anybody, and he would take advantage of me nearly every day. And it got to the point where it just hurt less to not fight. Like if I just let it happen, it'll be fine. But then one day my birth control goes missing and I'm like, where is it? And he's like, you don't need that. I want a baby. I was like, good for you. I don't. Like, think you know? I'm 19. I'm not ready for a kid. And so I faked a period. He would always get me these like cherry Slurpees, and he'd put vodka in the cherry Slurpee. And I would like put the tampons in to try and get them red in case he ever did like look in the trash.
Yeah.
But that only lasted 3 days before he wanted to get laid. And so and that's when I really tried to fight, and things got a little bit more intense. Bruises around my body, just the worst of it. And then one day I woke up just like drenched in blood, and I was like, oh, it's gonna be one of those periods. Like my period had actually started. Like, oh, there's just a massacre going on in my pants. No big deal.
Yeah.
I wasn't feeling good, but Rob didn't care. He was going to make me work. He always told me, if you want to eat, you have to work. That was his thing, is you have to earn any food. It's Phoenix, Arizona. It's 120 degrees outside, and he's got me going door to door
Drunk.
drunk, and
Yeah.
and I was just, that day I was not feeling good, and I was about to pass out. Like I almost passed out in somebody's lawn, and Rob got pissed off, and he was going to finish that street. And so I go into the car, and I don't know how long I was in there, but I like blacked out. I was half aware, but I couldn't open my eyes to see what was going on. But like I could hear bits and pieces. And like I remember him coming and getting in the car, and him telling me to sit up and put my seatbelt on, we're gonna go. And I didn't respond. Like I couldn't move my body, like I couldn't open my eyes. And he basically just got pissed off and started driving with me, like limp over the dashboard, no seatbelt or anything. The next thing I remember, he was carrying me, and I heard his aunt's voice asking what happened, and then her saying, no, you need to take her to the hospital. And then I don't remember anything else after that. I remember waking up in a hospital. Turns out I was having a miscarriage. They believe. They came in, and the doctor told me that in order to be considered a pregnancy, your HCG levels or your pregnancy levels needed to be a 5. Mine were a 4. So they believed that if it was a miscarriage, it was just very early on, but that's why I was bleeding so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob was in the corner the entire time. Not once did the hospital staff ask me if I was okay. Not if I was okay, but they didn't ask me if I was safe. They never asked him to leave the room. They probably thought he was my dad.
Probably, yeah.
I remember the fury on Rob's face when they mentioned that it could be a miscarriage. Like he was pissed. So they released me into his care. He was pissed because we missed half a day of working.
Sure.
Yeah, right. It's all my fault.
Yeah.
So the next day, he made me work again. I'm sitting there. I'm still bleeding. You know, I'm still like dying. Nope, he still wants me to work. Then, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. It's just how things come to me.
Absolutely.
He had a friend from high school that he hadn't seen in a while. And he was like, we're going to go and pick up my friend who's like an hour away from us. And I'm like, sure, whatever. I don't care. That means I don't have to work. Cool. Mm-hmm. And so I hadn't eaten anything that day. And he got me cherry Slurpee and just like filled it with vodka. And I was like, I don't want any. And he goes, you either drink it with the vodka or you don't. And I'm like, fine, whatever. So I like down it. So by the time we get to his friend's house, I'm pretty buzzed. His friend gets in the car and Rob tells me, all right, you're going to drive. I was like,
what?
I can't. I don't feel like dying today.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, okay, fine, but you'll have to make it up to me. I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. Is this an 18 plus podcast?
There's no language restrictions or anything. You can say anything about what happened. Yeah.
Okay. I've like been very careful about like what I'm saying to try and not, because
you're good. It's part of this is like part of the point of the podcast is to talk about like everything that actually happened and not feel the need to like not
censor
include
yourself.
Certain details. Okay. Yeah. It's very much open. Yeah.
Yeah. So he tells me, fine, I'll drive, but you're gonna have to owe me. And I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, and he goes, you have to give me roadhead. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, excuse me? And his buddy in the back seat is like, oh, come on, girl, take care of your man. Like, I won't watch. And I'm like, um, thank you, creeper. Like, no.
Yeah. Who are you?
Those were my choices. Was I could either drive drunk, or I would be forced to give him head on the highway. So I'm like, those aren't really the greatest choice. I don't want either choice.
Yeah. Tough options.
He had my phone. Like I didn't even know where we were. And so I did it. And I I found a peppermint in the center console. And I was like, I could just put this in my mouth and I wouldn't have to touch it. So he goes, what are you doing? And I was like, I heard it was a thing. It was supposed to make it feel better for you. I just want to make it feel good. And he totally believed me. And so I really did. I gave him a blowjob with a freaking peppermint pushed up against him so that my tongue wouldn't touch.
Nice.
And then, it worked.
Yeah.
And his buddy is just in the background, just laughing his ass off. That's when I started just kind of like giving in. Because the sooner that he got what he wanted, the sooner he'd be done, the sooner he got over it. And his friends were creeps.
I'm sure they were, yeah.
Yeah, creeps. And like,
it sounds like a whole operation. Like,
oh gosh, yeah. It wasn't until after I published my book that like it even like became a possibility that there was something more going on that I wasn't aware of. Because people started asking me, if you were blackout drunk, drugged up, is it possible that any of his friends did something?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I don't know about any of it.
Yeah.
If it is, like, I don't have any recollection. The only thing that I remember is the very first time I got drunk with Rob. It was with him and his cousin Keith. And I'm pretty sure they drugged my drink. Mm-hmm. And then they took me back to Keith's hotel. And then Rob leaves me there with him. And Keith was very handsy. Like, he didn't do anything other than try and like snuggle. And Rob tried to claim that he's a very friendly guy. Yeah.
Classic.
Just little too friendly.
Yeah.
A little too friendly. But like, other than that, I don't have any recollection of any of his friends like touching me, but like it's very possible. Mm-hmm. And like it's almost and people have brought up that it was almost like I was being groomed to be sex trafficked. Yeah. Like everything that was happening, if I hadn't gotten away when I did, very likely would have led to that. So I don't know that for sure, but yeah.
So how did you get to the point where you were able to escape?
It was getting close to the time that my dad was ready to move into the apartment. I had decided that enough was enough and I needed to get away from Rob. So Rob I don't know how he found this house, but there was just one day we're living at a house that he supposedly rented. I don't know when he had time to talk to somebody about renting this house. I'm pretty sure he was just squatting in a random empty house, but mm-hmm. he brings me there. He gives me like a tour of it. And he starts talking about how our kids are going to live in this room and this is our room. And I'm like, no, mm-hmm. No, like this dude is serious. Like he fully wants to impregnate me right now. And like, that was kind of everything together. And I was like, you know what? No, I got to get away from this guy. And so I started to kind of like gain his trust by like giving in and pretending like I was in fact his girlfriend. Mm-hmm. I started calling him babe and like trying to initiate stuff. Like I was trying to like get him to believe that he had me, mm-hmm. you know, and it worked. because I told him that I had to go help my dad move into his new apartment. And he goes, okay, fine. Just drop me off at Keith's and you have 2 hours and then you have to come back. And I was like, totally. Yeah, no, I dropped him off and I zoomed to my dad's, and he didn't know my dad's new address. He knew my dad's old address, but the apartment he didn't know. And I get to the apartment and I get inside, I slam the door behind me and I fall to the ground and I just start sobbing. My dad is like, what's going on? What is wrong? And like, I sat there and I told him the whole story.
So this has been like about 4 weeks?
It's about 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
About 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. My dad felt really crappy because he felt like I wouldn't have been in that situation if I didn't feel the need to stay for the job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my dad asks if I want to go to the police, what I want to do. And I'm like, I don't. I just want to forget it all. I just want to forget it all happened and change my freaking phone number. And so we did. We changed my phone number immediately. I tried to go back to life as normal. I just wanted to forget it. And I didn't want to think about anything.
That's all we want when we get out of those experiences and while it's going on. It's like, all I want to do is not think about this anymore. And especially when you're in an environment like that where it's the only thing that you're experiencing in life.
Yeah. But 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant.
And this is how long after the miscarriage?
About 4 weeks, which is why so either I just had some major bleeding, mm-hmm. or I was pregnant with twins and I potentially lost one. And they believe that that's actually what was happening, was that I was at the time pregnant with twins. I lost one and that was miscarriage, but like, because of how far along I was, they believed that that's what it was.
Got it.
So, yeah, I went to my OBGYN to get back on birth control. And so that's what my appointment was. And like, they have you pee in a cup every time. Mm-hmm. It's not fully prepared for my doctor to walk in, looking at her little
clipboard.
Let's try that again. I was not prepared for my doctor to walk in, looking down at her clipboard, and she goes, well, you're pregnant. And I'm like, that's exactly how I found out I was pregnant. Well, you're pregnant. And I just break down sobbing. And like, she clearly felt bad about breaking it to me that way. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so she gets me to kind of calm down and then like gives me my options and everything and sets me up for an ultrasound and then sends me out to the receptionist. And the receptionist goes, do you know what hospital you're wanting to give birth at? What the fuck? Like, why? Well, this is not the time. And I just start sobbing again. So then I'd gone back to work for the company. Boss man had no idea what happened, said that he had never said any of that stuff and that he would love to have me on the team. And
this is after you're back with your dad now.
Yes.
Wow.
And so it was going to just be a temporary thing anyway until I found something else, but like it was good money. And so I was like, all right, cool. My doctor told me that I couldn't keep doing that job because it was too hot outside. It was too stressful on my body. And because I was a contracted employee, they did not have to accommodate that. If they didn't have something else that I could do, sorry, you're out of luck. Mm-hmm. So, I call boss man and I try to see if there's anything else that I could do in the company. And he tells me no. And then he goes, well, are you going to tell Rob? And I was like, no. And he goes, he's going to find out. This is his cousin. This is his family. I knew that if I tried to keep it from him, and he tried to take me to court, and I didn't try and like let him know at all, knowing full well that Rob was the father, that like I could get in some deep shit. So I called him and blocked my number and everything, and I told him just to tell him, and he goes, "Oh, well, now we got to get married." Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And then I'm like freaking out, and I just start to drive. And I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. I just started driving, and I end up on the street of the house that Rob occupied. And I'm just like parked outside. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I see a car pull into the driveway of the house. And this young girl, couldn't have been more than 25 years old, gets out of the car and starts bounding towards the front door. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, did he replace me? Like, is she his new victim? Like, he's going to hurt her. She needs to get out. I don't know what to do. So I call the police. What am I going to tell them? And then I remembered that he had mentioned that he had 9 children, and didn't pay his child support on any of them. And I was like, they could get him on being a deadbeat dad. Like, I know where he's at. Come get him. So that's what I did. I called the cops, and I was like, hey, so there's this guy. He doesn't pay his child support. I know where he's at. Come and get him. And the cop is like, okay, we'll look into it. Thank you. And I was like, so you're going to send somebody? And they're like, well, not right now. This isn't an emergency. And I was like, no, you need to send somebody. And the dispatcher was like, is there something else you want to tell me? And I just like blurred out. I was like, he raped me. He's got another girl, and I think she's in trouble. You need to send somebody now. The dispatcher tells me that I need to go to the police department. I had no intention of filing a police report, but when I got there, they wanted my statement. They wanted me to tell them everything. And I wanted that girl to be safe, and I wanted my baby to be safe. Mm-hmm. So they put me in front of 2 male cops. It was more of an interrogation than taking my statement. I tell them about the hot tub incident, and they're like, oh, well, did you say no? Did he have any reason to believe you didn't want it? And I was like, I didn't say yes. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, is it really fair to call it rape if he stopped when you told him to stop and he didn't get a no from you? And they're like, well, is it really fair to call it rape if you just gave in?
So bizarre.
So then it turns out that I was at the wrong police station. They wanted me. I was in the wrong district. So because Rob's house was in one district, but all of the rapes occurred in a separate district, I had to file the report in that district.
Got it.
They tell me I have to go somewhere else. And I get in my car and I'm like, I don't want to go through this again.
Why would you? Right.
Like, then I remembered there's this other girl. There's a baby in my belly. I needed to protect everybody else. Mm-hmm. So I go over to the other police department. This one was better. He actually validated everything I said. But then he had to pass it on to the detective. So then the detective tells me, oh, well, this is kind of just a case of a he said, she said.
Yep, same with me.
I was like, okay. And he goes, well, we could try and get him to admit to it doing a call. Let's call him.
Yeah.
See if we can get him to admit to it. Didn't prepare me at all. Didn't tell me how to go about doing this, whatever. He said he was going to write some stuff on the board. Well, Rob answers the phone and I'm like, I don't know what to freaking say.
Yeah.
And so like, I figured we'd continue on the last conversation that we had. And I was like, so you really want to be a part of this baby's life? And I'm like waiting for the detective to finish writing. I'm like the slowest writer in the world. And Rob goes, yeah, it's my baby. And either you're going to marry me or I'm going to take the baby. And I was like, what makes you believe that you should have any rights to this child? And he goes, it's mine. And I was like, but you raped me. And he goes, fine, we'll have a judge decide who's a better parent, and then hung up.
So they got that on recording.
Yeah, but he didn't admit to it. He said, we'll let a judge decide who gets the baby. Never admitted to the rape. And so the detective was like, well, I could go and try and talk to him. So the investigation into everything consisted of the detective going to Rob's mom's house, asking if he was there. She said no. The detective hands her a card and says, when you see him, have him call me. He never called. So that was the end of the investigation.
Classic.
Yeah. So I called every day, then every week, then monthly, then it just got to the point where like I realized that they're just not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. And so I decided I was just going to raise this baby and I was going to do it myself and everything was going to be fine. Like he knew about the baby. I was prepared to go to court if I needed to or whatever, but I was not going to try and like initiate anything. So I have the baby and my son is 10 years old now, mm-hmm. The love of my life. But the thing that people don't tell you about being a single parent, if I wanted government assistance, I needed to name my rapist. And I tried to do the whole, I don't know who the father is. But because I made a police report and I admitted to the police that he was the father of my child, it was in the system. The government knew. And so every time I'd go to file for any kind of government assistance, just insurance for my child, they would have his name. And I'd have to explain, I don't want his name on there. I don't want it. And I'd have to explain why. And I'd have to like go through this whole like sobbing and telling them what happened. And my husband, my now husband, who I met when my son was 18 months old, became my son's dad, like best friends from the beginning. And when we got married, my husband wanted to adopt my son. Well, he can't adopt without terminating the rights first. And Rob wouldn't agree to signing over his rights. He didn't want to use those rights. He didn't want to utilize them. He didn't want to didn't try to see my son, didn't try to take me to court or anything. We ended up having to just like go to court. And originally I thought it was going to be uncontested. So I didn't get a lawyer. I just tried to just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
I show up to court fully prepared to just have this all done in one day. And they've got him on the phone. He's like, I didn't even know this baby existed. Like, there's a police recording of you admitting that you knew that this baby existed.
Yeah.
Basically, he just wanted to make it as hard as possible for me to have this done. So then, so we end that court hearing, and they tell me, you're probably going to want to get a lawyer. And I was like, I can't afford a lawyer. And they're like, well, he gets a lawyer and you're not going to want to go up against a lawyer. And I was like, what do you mean he gets a lawyer? Turns out because I was infringing on his rights, he gets a court-appointed attorney.
Wow.
But because I was the one infringing on his rights, I had to pay for mine. And that's when I wrote the book. I started writing the book originally just for me, just to get it all out, whatever. I started posting it chapter by chapter on Wattpad and realized that people were actually interested. Like I got to #1 in nonfiction on Wattpad by chapter 8 of my book and realized people are interested in this.
Wow.
And I was like, maybe I could turn it into a real book. And so like I finished it. I had submitted to several publishers, and my case never got any kind of media coverage. Like it wasn't known.
Right.
People wouldn't want to read about an unknown thing. I was like, screw it, I'll self-publish myself. So I self-published using Amazon's publishing thing. I did all this research and everything said that self-published authors, especially first-time ones, expect 250 copies in the lifetime of the book. Mm-hmm. Not in the first year, not in 10, like the lifetime of the book, 250 copies. And I'm like, that would still get me pretty close to a lawyer, you know? So I published my book and then I start marketing it on TikTok. Mm-hmm. And here we are, 14-ish months later, and I've sold over 35,000 copies.
That's amazing.
We raised the money for the lawyer in the first month.
Holy shit.
Yeah, we hired our lawyer in January. We started going to, our first hearing was in February. And of course, Rob has his lawyer and is trying to fight things. And we ended up having like 3 more hearings because they kept asking for a continuance.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And then finally, my lawyer was like, Your Honor, we don't want a continuance. They have had plenty of opportunities. Can we go ahead and just schedule a trial? And the judge was like, yeah, we'll do that. Well, all right, cool. Yeah, Rob didn't show up to any of the hearings. He didn't show up to the trial. His lawyer was there for all of them, but he wasn't present for any of them. Like, clearly he wasn't actually interested in like stopping his termination of rights. He just wanted to make it as hard as possible for me. So by the time we get to trial, like, his lawyer was just done. He was like, I haven't heard from my client in a month. And anytime the judge would address his lawyer's like, defense has nothing. Yeah. Defense has no objection. Like, he was just, you could tell he was only there because he had to be. Of course. He was just not a happy lawyer. And so the lawyer or the judge has 60 days to make a determination when it comes to terminating parental rights. By the end of that trial, it was like an hour, barely lasted an hour. Yeah. And talking to the social workers and his lawyer and everything like that, like, the judge was like, he talked to my lawyer and he told my lawyer, if you send over the request for the termination or whatever, like the actual paperwork, I'll sign it before I leave the office today. So he had 60 days to make that decision. He made it right then, like within an hour. It was pretty quick. And then a week from tomorrow, we have our adoption hearing, and my husband will finally be able to legally adopt.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Oh, wow. And at this point, he's been in your life or your son's life for what, 8 years or something?
8 years. Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And it's so sweet because my son adores my husband, and he asked for the adoption. And we asked Wesley, do you want to keep your last name, which is my maiden name, or do you want to be Stoddard? And he goes, like you and Daddy? Like, yeah. Do you want to be a Stoddard or do you want to stay with your current last name? And he goes, I want to be a Stoddard. And I'm like, okay, cool. The sweetest moment ever. And so as of next week, he will have my husband's middle and last name.
What an absolutely lovely, well, it's not the end of the story, but the current status of things sounds like it couldn't be better. It's really cool to see the way that you've transformed this into something that is, not only beneficial for yourself and your family, but 35,000 people. Like that's a wild number.
Yeah, it is. It's been a whirlwind, and I get emails all the time and messages on Instagram and TikTok and everything of people thanking me for telling
Hmm.
my story. Because when people think of kidnapping, they think of a white van pulling up to you on the side of the street and grabbing you,
Yeah.
and then tying you down in a basement somewhere.
Yeah.
But that's not how most kidnappings are. And when people think of rape, they think that it's only the violent kind, or that if you
Yeah.
gave in, that it's not rape, or like those cops, they
Hmm.
think, oh well, if you just gave in, or if you didn't fight hard enough. And so many people have reached out to me because they felt invalidated
Right.
in their trauma and their experiences, and they were like, your book made me realize that my trauma is valid. And it's an amazing thing, because I wrote this book for me to get it out,
Hmm.
and then I published it for me to help raise money.
Yeah.
And it turned into something so much bigger than that. And I'm sure what
Yeah.
it's like.
For
Sharing
sure.
your trauma turns into this. It's an amazing experience for sure.
It's a feeling unlike anything else. And I had no idea when I started doing stand up about getting molested. I had no idea what the response was going to be. To this day, whenever I do the material, it's like people will just tell me, strangers will come up to me after shows and be like, hey, I got molested too. I got raped. People will just start telling me like this wild stuff that's happened to them. And it's especially on TikTok when you're able to reach crazy amounts of people with this content, the messages that I get as well. It makes it all feel very purposeful and like not worth it, but it feels good to turn it into
I'm
something.
so glad. I
Yeah,
was so glad that I went through something so traumatic. No,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
but
It's a really fulfilling feeling,
yeah,
and you're right. Molestation's the same way, where people assume that it's like it's associated with stranger danger in the same way that white vans are associated with rape. It's like it's just like a lack of knowledge that like most of the time these things happen with people that know you and oftentimes you're friends with, whether it's somebody that you work with or a family member. These issues are so much bigger than how people normally perceive it, and I think it's a lot of it is just like people just don't have the understanding. And whether they're cops, I mean, cops of all people should know what the what the deal is, but people just
that's
in
a
everyday
whole
life.
other story.
Yeah, for sure. But like people just don't know any better, and that's like why it's so great that you're able to use your story now to spread the word and like help validate people that felt invalid. And
Yes.
I felt the same way when I was going through the experience, where it was like, this was never painful for me. The molestation it never hurt me.
Mhm.
It was like on the spectrum of molestation, it was like relatively, it wasn't harmful physically. I'm like, I'm not in pain. So like in my head, that's enough to invalidate it. So
Yeah.
it's like we have all of these things that we come up with when we're going through these experiences that cause us to think that we shouldn't speak up or that it's not a problem. I mean, part of it's a defense mechanism where it's like, if this isn't a problem in my head, then it's not a real problem, and I don't need to worry about people finding out about this. And I'm sure you experienced many similar feelings. It's the survivor guilt, and everyone who goes through things like this, it's like we all have different versions of it, but the feelings are very similar. And obviously our experiences are completely different, but like I know how you feel in many ways, like feeling trapped. And because I kept going over to my friend's house for 2 years. I got
Yeah.
molested, and it was like I remember being like, well, how could I possibly speak up now, because everyone's gonna be like, what were you doing for 2 years? And it's like, well, I just like my friend a lot. Like what more do you want from me? I don't know what to do. So I think it's so important to cut ourselves some slack for
Oh, for
not
sure.
responding how we wish we would have in the moment, and to recognize that like we did the best we could in the circumstances, and there's
Absolutely.
nothing to be gained from blaming ourselves and wishing things had been different. But there's so much to be gained from taking this experience and transforming it into something that benefits you and other people,
Yep.
which I don't think either of us were aware of that this could be even done, while it was
No.
going on. And now it's like, wow, I feel very grateful to be able to have these connections with people, whether it's people reaching out on TikTok or a conversation with you. Like we just met and it's like, oh, well, I know you now,
Yep. Oh yeah. No, we're
Trauma bond. Yeah.
we're a flock of fawn.
A flock of fawns. Yes. Yes, exactly. If that's not what it's called, it's what it should be called.
Totally. I'm gonna start a petition on that. We start calling ourselves a flock of fawns.
I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to somebody who has been through something similar and is hoping to get to the point that you're at now?
Realize and accept that it wasn't your fault and that your trauma is valid and what happened is valid. And don't ever compare your trauma to somebody else's and try and use that as a way to invalidate how you feel. It doesn't matter what you went through or how bad it may seem to other people or how not bad. It happened to you, and that is your trauma, and that is something that is valid.
It's so true. Absolutely. It's like we have a tendency to diminish our own experiences because other people had it worse, and or what seems to be worse in our heads, and that makes it feel like, well, why am I complaining? I don't need to make a big deal about this. Like it almost feels like you're burdening other people or like diminishing what other people went through by being like, I had something happen to me too. But they're like, you feel bad almost about it, when in reality, it's like the people that you're worried about in those situations would be so stoked to hear that there are other people that know what they've been through or can relate on some level of feeling. So I think you're absolutely right. That's great advice. And it feels like everyone experiences that to some degree of just like...
Always.
Whether it's the defense mechanism aspect and you're trying to minimize the impact that it had on you, or it's just like some sort of maybe it's like a fawning thing where you just want everybody else to be happy and you're like, I don't want you to feel bad about me. I don't want you to, I don't want to ruin your experience by talking about my own. It's like you'll benefit more people than you will ever know just by being honest about what happened to you.
And it'll feel better for yourself as well. Like, when you stop minimizing it and accepting the fact that like this shit happened, you take that and you go to therapy and you do everything that you need to or whatever. And the sooner that you can stop minimizing it, the sooner that you can get all of the help that you need to get past it. But so many people don't, because of that whole, oh, well, it was just this.
Yeah. That's what it is.
It was only this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't have that happen. Like, then they're like, oh, well, it's not worth talking to a therapist. It's not worth getting the help. It's not worth, but it is. It absolutely is.
And we all feel that way. So it's like the quicker we just get it out in the open and realize, oh shit, I'm not alone in this, the quicker we can start healing. And
I spent 10 years feeling alone, 10 years before I wrote my book. But as soon as I put it out there, as soon as I started telling my story, I stopped feeling. I thought I was the only person in the entire world who had a baby from rape. But I now have at least 10 friends who have children from rape. And I never would have found them. And those were just the ones that I'm friends with.
Yeah.
And so it's not only healing for you, but it's healing for other people.
Which also ends up being healing for you in a way that you can't even comprehend. It's like, holy shit, the feeling you get when other people say that they're speaking up because of you is like, whoo, I could talk about this all day, you know, like
Yes.
if that's what the reaction is going to be.
Right.
So I love it, and I'm very grateful to have had you on the podcast today.
I'm so
Where,
grateful to have been here. Thank you.
of course, where can people buy your book, and where can they find you on social media?
So they can find my book on Amazon. Just look up In Plain Sight, A True Story of Kidnapping and Rape by Anna D. Stoddard. Or you can buy a signed copy directly from me on my website at annadstoddard.com. And I have TikTok and Instagram, both of which are anna.d.stoddard.
And that's Stoddard.
Yes.
Awesome. Anna, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm
Thank you,
so
Sebastian.
happy for you, for your current situation, and good luck with the adoption. Not that you need it. It sounds like it's
Yeah.
going to be great. And
Yes.
I wish you and your family all the best, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you. Same to you, Sebastian.